Hey VCers, happy Monday. It's Matt again, and continuing on with my reviews of Kinks albums, slowly but surely getting through their entire catalog here. So, this installment brings us to 1971 and Muswell Hillbillies. Um, yeah, I misspoke a little bit on my last review. I said that the last one I did was Lola, the album that came out in 1970. Said that every album was kind of a rock opera or concept album from here on out up through about 1977 or so. This one is really neither, though it does have sort of a theme running through it. Theme of sort of fighting against conformity, feelings of not fitting in, mental health or lack thereof, and also sort of a sadness of seeing uh, neighborhoods and towns destroyed by progress, for lack of a better word, as old buildings come down to make room for new. So there is a theme running through it. I also said that it was kind of tough sledding after Lola until about 77, 79 or so. Well, I never had this album before. I got this just the other day for the first time. I did have some friends that had it, so I did hear it back in back in the early 80s. Didn't really think much of it at the time, but thinking it's certainly not one of their better efforts, but it's not a terrible album by any means. And a lot of these albums when they came out, this run from about Muswell Hillbillies up through I guess Sleepwalkers, the one that came out before Low Budget, weren't very well received by critics or a lot of their fans at the time, but in the years since, the stance towards them is some of these albums at least has softened a little bit, which is kind of understandable because it's kind of like the Beatles solo albums in the 70s when they came out. A lot of those weren't very well received, and things like Ram and Mind Games and so forth that a lot of people think kind of highly of nowadays. And the reason I say that makes sense is that you just had the run of the Beatles, Revolver, Rubber Soul, Revolver, Pepper, White Album, Abbey Road, and then all of a sudden you get McCartney and Mind Games and sometime in New York City and Extra Texture and things like that. So when you stack them side by side with Revolver or Sergeant Pepper, they're not going to fare too well. Same with these 70s Kinks albums. When you stack them up against what had just come out a year or a couple of years or 3 years before, Village Green, Arthur, Face to Face, Something Else, songs like You Really Got Me and All Day and All of the Night, they're pretty lacking. But that was a long time ago. In the passage of time, we can kind of look at these records now on their own merits and not compare them to the 60s Kinks and just look at them as what they are and appreciate them to some extent. So yeah, this is the album that came out after Lola. I'll show you the gatefold. It's got them in front of some row houses or buildings, I guess. This building is called Cats on Holiday. I guess that's some kind of shop. I don't know. This is them in a pub somewhere in England. There's Ray and Dave on the back. I know there's some glare on there. You can't see that. Uh, Here's the other big change for the Kinks was that they had been on Pie in England or Reprise since their beginning. They'd kind of stuck with each other through thick and thin. With this album, they move over to RCA Records. So this is their first RCA album. RCA was no doubt the fact that the Kinks had kind of been forgotten in America, and then they come have a huge hit with Lola. RCA was probably hoping and expecting big things with this album. They were kind of disappointed because the album didn't really do much chart-wise or hit single-wise. But yeah, this isn't as good as Lola. It's certainly not as good as what came out in the 60s. But I was listening to it the last couple of days, and I had heard this, like I said, I'd heard songs off this album 30 years ago, and I didn't really think much of it then. So it'd been a long time since I'd heard these songs, but There's actually, I'm not going to say it's essential or a must-have or a great album because it's not. It's not a terrible album either. And we'll just go. I'm not going to go through every song because some of them really aren't worth getting into. But 20th Century Man opens the album, probably the best song on the album, and that became a concert staple for them ever since. Pretty good song, kind of a 20th Century Man, but I don't want to be here. Don't feel like I fit in these times, which is a theme that Ray Davies had explored earlier in the Kinks. With better songs actually, even though this is I like this song quite a bit. Same theme that Brian Wilson explored on Pet Sounds and earlier Beach Boys songs. So good opener, pretty good song. Next song up, Acute Schizophrenia Paranoia Blues, which is another song that's pretty good. I like it. It's kind of sounds like something if you were walking around Bourbon Street in New Orleans, kind of music you would hear. There's a good mix of music on here. There's kind of some Cajun, some country, some horns, and music hall again they keep going back to, and rock and roll. So there's a pretty good mix of music. Then I'm going to skip around some. There's a Skin and Bone is another song that became one of their concert staples. It's okay. I'm not crazy about it, but a lot of people like it. Alcohol's another one that became kind of a not exactly a hit, but a concert staple for them. I like it. It's fun. It's a little too cliched and over the top, maybe, but it's still a fun song. Side one, side one completes with "Complicated Life," which is probably the second best song here. Life is overrated. Life is complicated. Kind of a funny line there. Good song. I like that a lot. Side two, really, Have a Cup of Tea is the standout track. Well, no, that's the second best track on side two, I'll say, but that's a fun song. It's kind of a knees up, sing along type song that cup of tea cures all ills, whether you scraped your knee or you're on your deathbed. Have a cup of tea, and have a cup of tea with your cup of tea is kind of a funny song. Oklahoma USA is another song that they played in concert a lot through the 70s. I really don't get the attraction of it. It's just sort of there. And it's talking about a girl in England who's dreaming about being somewhere else and being far away and dreaming about being in Oklahoma, USA. I don't know about you, but if somebody's doesn't like where they are and their dream is to go to Oklahoma, they got to upgrade their dream some. I've been to Oklahoma. It's not really not much there to see. So Muswell Hillbilly is the final song, and I'd say that's the best song on side two. So all those songs are pretty good. The rest of the songs on here are not terrible, but nothing spectacular. Even might be background music if you're doing something around the house, but even at that, you can find better stuff to put on for working around the house songs. There's a lot of songs on here. Like I said, they're just kind of here. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 songs out of however many are on here. I think there's 12 songs, that are good. I would give nothing here that I would compare to classic Kinks of the 60s output, but some of these songs on here I'd rate on an individual basis from, say, 7 to an 8. Album overall, I think I'd give it a 6. The Davy Ray's singing a little different style all of a sudden than he was in the 60s, and his lyrics are not as good as they used to be. Kind of the subtle nuance and the kind of picture perfect imagery that he used to do so effortlessly has given way more and more to kind of bombastic sloganeering and ham-fisted lyrics, and that would continue. really through their career. They'd get a little better in the late 70s and early 80s with making more accessible songs. But yeah, I'd give this a 6. It's not a bad album, and it's got, like I said, I think about 4 or 5 songs on it that are pretty good. Nothing great. Definitely not the place to start, but it's better than I remembered it, and maybe it's the passage of time, but I enjoy it a little bit more than when I heard it 30 years ago. So, yeah, Muswell Hillbillies, 1971. It's okay.